Daniel lived alone in a small wooden cabin near the edge of the forest. He had moved there after leaving the military, hoping for a quiet life far from war and cities. But that night, the forest was not quiet. The wind was cold, and dark clouds moved across the moon. Daniel sat near the fire, reading an old book. When he heard a strange sound, it wasn't an animal, not wind, not thunder. It was a soft cry, weak and broken, coming from deep in the trees. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and took a flashlight. He had learned to trust his instincts, and something told him this was not normal. As he stepped outside, the sound came again, a child's cry, soft and scared. He followed the sound carefully, moving between tall trees and broken branches. Then he saw it. There was a small crash site. Hidden between the trees, a metal escape pod, half buried in dirt and leaves, smoke rising slowly from one side. And lying next to it was a little girl. She looked human at first glance, but when Daniel moved closer, he saw the truth. Her skin had a soft silver shine. Her hair was pure white. And her eyes, when they opened, glowed faint blue in the dark. She tried to sit up, but fell back, too weak to move. Daniel knelt beside her, speaking gently. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now." She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. She opened her mouth, and her voice came in broken English. "Don't hurt me," she whispered. "Please." Daniel's heart cracked. She looked so small, so lost. He carefully picked her up in his arms, and she didn't resist. She was cold, shaking, barely conscious. Her head rested against his chest as he walked back toward the cabin. The wind howled louder now, and the rain began to fall. But Daniel didn't stop. He wrapped her in his coat and moved as fast as he could. Back inside the warm cabin, he laid her on the couch and covered her with blankets. She didn't speak again for a long time. Daniel made warm soup, but she only drank a little. Her eyes watched everything, full of fear and sadness. "Are you alone?" he asked softly. She nodded, tears building in her glowing eyes. "Where are your parents?" he asked again. She just shook her head and looked down. Then, very quietly, she whispered something that made him freeze. "Will you be my dad?" Daniel stared at her, unsure if he had heard it right. She looked up, her voice shaking. "Please, don't send me away," she said. "I don't have anyone but you." "You feel safe?" For a moment, Daniel couldn't speak. All the walls he had built over the years, the loneliness, the silence, it all cracked in that single moment. He knelt beside her again and gently placed a hand on her small shoulder. "You don't have to be scared anymore," he said slowly. "You can stay here as long as you need." A tiny smile appeared on her face. It was the first time he saw hope in her eyes. Later that night, as she slept on the couch, wrapped in soft blankets, Daniel sat nearby, thinking deeply. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why did she fall from the sky in an escape pod, alone and injured? He didn't know the answers yet, but one thing was clear. That little alien girl had chosen him, and somehow, in just a few minutes, his quiet, lonely world had completely changed. Outside, the rain fell harder in the sky above the forest. Something else moved, another ship, dark and silent, scanning below, but Daniel didn't see it. He was looking at the sleeping child on his couch, her hand gently holding his, and in that moment, he made a silent promise. He would protect her, no matter what came next. The morning came slowly. The forest was quiet again, but inside Daniel's cabin, his thoughts were loud. He hadn't slept much, watching over the alien girl on the couch. She stirred in her sleep, fingers tightening around the corner of the blanket. Daniel brought over warm water and a bit of bread, placing it gently beside her when her eyes opened, glowing faint blue in the soft sunlight. She looked around like she had forgotten where she was. "It's okay," Daniel said calmly. "You're safe here." The girl sat up slowly, her silver skin shining under the light. I remember, she whispered. You didn't hurt me. Daniel gave a small nod. What's your name? She hesitated, then spoke. Lyra. It was a beautiful name, but full of sadness when she said it. Daniel tried to smile. Lyra, I'm Daniel. She looked at him for a moment, then picked up the cup and sipped the warm water carefully. She didn't drink fast, almost like she didn't trust it yet. Daniel watched closely. He had seen fear before on the battlefield in the eyes of young soldiers. But Lyra's fear was something different. It was deep. Like it had lived inside her for a long time. As the hours passed, Lyra stayed quiet, watching every corner of the room, listening for sounds outside. She didn't cry, didn't complain. She was too quiet for a child when Daniel left her alone. For a minute to step outside, he heard something crash inside. He rushed back in, thinking she'd fallen, but she was standing near the door, eyes wide. A kitchen knife in her small hands. Someone's coming. She asked quickly, her voice sharp. Daniel raised his hands slowly. No, it was just me. I stepped out to check the sky. Her shoulders relaxed, but she kept the knife. Daniel gently walked over and took it from her fingers. You don't need this here, he said softly. Lyra looked down, ashamed. I always need it, she whispered. They always come for me. Daniel felt a cold shiver run through him. He knelt in front of her again. Who comes for you? She hesitated. Then said hunters from the black ships. They want me because I'm not just a child. Daniel listened carefully as she spoke in broken words. She told him that her people were attacked, her home destroyed. Her parents were part of something important, a royal bloodline. She said, Lyra was marked, though she didn't show him how. Why would they hunt a child? He asked. She didn't answer that, just whispered, because I remembered too much that night. Strange things started to happen. The lights in Daniel's cabin flickered, even though the power was fine. The fireplace stayed lit without wood. And Lyra, when she thought no one was looking, floated above the ground for a moment while reaching for her blanket. Daniel saw it, but said nothing. He didn't want to scare her. Instead, he asked gently, Lyra, can you do things that other people can't? She looked scared again, but slowly nodded. It's not magic, she said. It's just who I am. Daniel sat down beside her, trying to understand what all this meant. Lyra was more than a scared little girl. She was something important. Something powerful, and if someone was looking for her, that meant danger was coming. Later that night, Daniel sat outside the cabin, his old blaster in hand, just in case. Lyra stepped out and sat beside him. Wrapped in a blanket, the stars above were bright and endless. She pointed at one of them. That one. My real home. Daniel looked up, not sure which one she meant. I don't want to go back, she said softly. Not alone. You don't have to. Daniel said quietly. Not anymore. She looked at him, her eyes shining not just with light, but with hope. Do you really mean it? She asked. You'd stay with me even if I'm different. Daniel turned to her and gave a firm nod. I don't care what you are, he said. You're not alone anymore, but far away. Beyond the stars, something beeped. A dark ship, flying through the night sky, had received a signal. A life beacon had activated from Lyra's crash site. They had found her trail, and they were coming. Daniel woke early, but Lyra was already awake, sitting on the windowsill, staring at the sky. Her small hands pressed against the cold glass as if she were searching for something far beyond the clouds. He stepped closer. Couldn't sleep? She didn't look at him, just whispered, They'll come soon. Daniel frowned. Who? Lyra turned her glowing eyes toward him. The ones who killed my family. Daniel didn't speak right away. He had spent years avoiding wars and politics, trying to forget his past. But now, an alien child was in his home, and her enemies were likely dangerous. He sat down at the table, opened the toolbox, and pulled out a small metal cube he had found in the wreckage days earlier. "I found this near your pod," he said. "Looks like it's still working." Lyra walked over and touched the cube gently. A soft hum began, and then the cube projected. A floating image into the air. It showed a tall alien woman holding a baby wrapped in silver cloth. Her voice played in a soft recording, speaking in Lyra's native language. Lyra stared at it in silence, tears filling her eyes. "That's my mother," she whispered. "She sent me away when the city fell." Daniel watched the next images. With care, explosions, dark ships in the sky, people running, towers falling, a full-scale invasion. Then something stranger happened. The cube glitched and a new image appeared. A circle of older aliens, dressed in white, stood around a glowing crystal. One of them said something in deep tones. And suddenly a glowing mark appeared on the baby's chest. Daniel looked at Lyra. "What was that?" Lyra pulled her shirt slightly to the side, showing the same glowing mark near her shoulder. "It means I carry the knowledge of my people," she said quietly. "Their history, their power, everything." Daniel was stunned. "You remember everything?" She nodded slowly. "Even before I was born. They placed memory inside me. I remember faces I never met, places I never saw. It's like a heavy dream that never ends." Daniel now understood why someone would want her. Captured, she wasn't just a lost child, she was a living archive. Maybe the only one left. Outside, the wind began to pick up again. The trees swayed, and in the far distance, a low hum filled the air, like a ship flying too high to see. Daniel stood instantly alert. He grabbed his old blaster from the cabinet and peered out the window. "Is it them?" he asked. Lyra listened, eyes focused, then whispered, "No." But soon, Daniel took a deep breath. "Then we need to prepare." He went to the back room and pulled out a hidden box beneath the floorboards. Inside were tools, gear, and old military tech he had sworn never to use again. But things had changed. Lyra followed him silently, watching him load energy cells and check weapons. "I don't want to fight," she said, "but I can't run forever." "You won't have to," Daniel replied, "not as long as I'm here." Later that evening, Lyra sat near the fire, holding the memory cube, watching the image of her mother again and again. Daniel watched her from across the room, wondering how much pain a child could carry without breaking. Suddenly, Lyra looked up. "Daniel, what if I told you there's something inside me that could change everything?" Daniel tilted his head. "What do you mean?" She looked scared, but serious. "My people put a crystal in me when I was born. A seed of light. It can awaken old machines, hidden cities, maybe even turn off warships. But if they get it, they'll twist it into a weapon." Daniel stared at her in shock. "You're carrying the one thing that could restart a fallen empire." Lyra nodded. "That's why they chased me across stars." Before Daniel could speak, the cabin lights flickered again. This time, it wasn't Lyra's powers, it was interference. Daniel rushed outside and looked toward the night sky. 3 dark shapes moved above the trees, lights blinking on their sides. "They weren't ships from Earth. They've found us," Daniel said, rushing back in. "We don't have much time." Lyra stood tall, her eyes brighter than before. "Then we go," she said. "But not just to run. There's one place left that can hide us, where the machines still obey the old light." Daniel nodded. "You lead the way, I'll keep us safe." And just like that, their quiet life in the woods was over. A new journey had begun, filled with unknowns. But Daniel no longer saw Lyra as a burden. She was a key, a legacy. And to him, she was something even more powerful. She was his daughter. Daniel moved quickly, closing the cabin windows and locking every door. He tossed Lyra a backpack, already filled with supplies, food, water, medical packs, and a spare cloak. "We don't have time," he said. They're closing in, outside strange lights, pass through the sky like silent stars falling sideways. Lyra stood in the center of the cabin, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. "I can feel them," she whispered. "Their minds are cold, hungry. They want what's inside me." Daniel grabbed a small remote and pressed a red button. All around the cabin, small metal devices blinked and came alive: traps, alarms, smoke bombs, and sound jammers. All old military tech he once swore he'd never use again. He looked at Lyra. "They're not going to get you." No matter what, suddenly, a loud buzzing filled the air. A black probe flew past the window. Scanning the walls of the cabin, Daniel pulled Lyra down. "They're mapping us." He aimed his old blaster and fired once. The probe exploded mid-air. But it was too late now. They knew exactly where he was moments later. Something heavy slammed into the ground nearby, shaking the cabin floor. Daniel peered through the crack of the door. 3 figures stood in the clearing, tall, armored, and faceless. Their bodies were covered in black and gray, and each held a glowing staff in one hand and a clawed scanner in the other. "Extraction team," Lyra whispered, trembling. "They don't speak, they just take." Daniel whispered. "Then we speak louder." He motioned for Lyra to get under. The floor hatched, the same place he once stored his survival gear. "You stay down there no matter what. You understand?" he said. She grabbed his hand, eyes wide. "Don't die." Daniel gave her a small smile. "I won't. Not today." The door burst open seconds later, and smoke bombs filled the room. Daniel rolled to the side and fired. Hitting one figure in the shoulder, the armor sparked but didn't break. They were fast. Stronger than anything Daniel had fought before. But he was smarter, and this was his ground. He activated a trap behind the kitchen wall. A flashbang lit up the room. Stunning 2 of them, he dashed forward and used a stun rod to knock one to the ground. The 3rd hunter came from the side, swinging its staff toward his head. Daniel ducked just in time and fired again, hitting its knee joint, slowing it down. But even as they fought, Daniel realized these were just scouts. The real threat hadn't arrived yet. Suddenly, the floor trap burst open and Lyra came out, hands glowing with strange light. "Stop," she cried. "You're not taking him." Daniel turned in shock. "Lyra, no. Get back." But she stepped forward bravely. She held out both hands, and a pulse of blue energy exploded from her chest, sending the hunters flying into the walls. The cabin shook from the blast. Books flew. The windows cracked and the fire went out. When the smoke cleared, the hunters were still, their armor steaming. Daniel grabbed Lyra, eyes wide. "What did you do?" She looked dizzy, her nose bleeding slightly. "I just... pushed back," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Daniel held her close. "You did what you had to." Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed from above. They ran outside and saw a larger ship lowering from the clouds. It was shaped like a black claw, lights spinning along its sides. Lyra gasped. "That's the collector ship. If it lands, we won't escape." Daniel looked around, then pointed to the hidden slope. "Behind the cabin, there's an old cave system back there." He said, "We'll use it to disappear." They ran fast, dodging tree branches and stepping over wet stones. Behind them, mechanical feet hit the ground. More hunters dropping from the ship. As they reached the mouth of the cave, Daniel set a charge on the rocks above it. Just before they entered, he turned and saw dozens of red lights blinking in the fog. T pressed the detonator, and the cliff face exploded, covering their trail in rubble. Inside the cave, it was dark and cold. But they were safe, at least for now. Daniel leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Lyra sat beside him, tired but alert. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I made them come here." Daniel turned to her, placed a hand on her head. "You didn't make them do anything," he said. They chose to chase something beautiful, something important, because they're afraid of what it means. She looked up at him with glowing eyes, filled with confusion and emotion. I don't understand, Daniel smiled. They fear you because you give others hope. For the first time, Lyra smiled. A real smile, not out of fear. But because someone believed in her, outside, the forest burned slowly under the hovering ships. But inside that cold, dark cave, something brighter had just started. Trust. And a promise that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The sun rose slowly over the canyon, painting the sky in orange and gold from the edge of the ruins. Daniel stood, watching the light spread across the silent world. Beside him, Lyra stood tall, the floating crystal gently orbiting her like a second moon. Her eyes glowed brighter than ever, but not from fear or pain. They glowed with purpose. The machines inside the temple now waited for her commands. The sky itself seemed quieter. As if holding its breath, Daniel placed his hand on her shoulder. So, what now? Lyra looked up at him. The system is sending signals, she said, to warn, to awaken others. But also to invite. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Invite who? Anyone who still remembers what peace means. Daniel gave a quiet smile. You might start something you can't stop, he said, half joking. Lyra looked at him seriously. I'm not trying to rule. I just want to fix what was broken. Before Daniel could speak, a loud sound echoed from above. He turned quickly, aiming his blaster out of habit. But what came down from the clouds wasn't an enemy ship. It was a delegation shuttle, white, round, and marked with peaceful symbols. It landed slowly outside the temple, and a ramp opened. Out walked a group of aliens, tall and elegant, dressed in long robes, their faces hidden behind thin masks. They looked around cautiously, and then one stepped forward. We followed the light. The lead speaker said, we didn't believe the rumors. But now we see the truth. They looked at Lyra and knelt. One by one, Starborn One. They whispered. The lost flame lives. Lyra stepped forward, nervous but steady. I'm not here to wear crowns, she said clearly. I only want safety, peace, and a home. The aliens lowered their heads. Then we follow your path. Daniel watched it all, unsure how to feel. He had protected her, carried her, even fought for her. But now, she was something far greater than just his daughter. Still, Lyra turned and walked back to him, standing at his side. I know what you're thinking, she said softly. You think this is too big for me, or for us? Daniel nodded. It is big, he said, but you're handling it better than most adults I've met. She smiled and reached into her satchel, pulling out a small silver ring. This is a symbol of bond, she said. Not marriage, family. She held it up to him. Will you wear it? As my father. Daniel froze, eyes wide. He looked at the ring, simple yet shining, and then back at her. His voice caught in his throat, but he nodded. He took the ring and slipped it onto his finger. I'm proud of you, he said, voice low. And I'm proud to be your dad. Tears filled Lyra's eyes. But she didn't hide them this time. For the first time, she was safe enough to cry. Suddenly, the temple lit up again, but this time, it was different. A new presence arrived not from the sky, but from beneath an old holographic A. Left by Lyra's ancestors, activated. It scanned Lyra and Daniel, then spoke in a calm, ancient voice. The bond is complete. The child is not alone. Legacy must now be shared. A beam of light touched Daniel's chest, and for a moment, memories flooded his mind. Not painful, but peaceful. As if Lyra's past and her people's dreams were letting him understand, he gasped, blinking in wonder. I saw stars being born, he said, shocked. Lyra smiled gently. That's what the light does. It doesn't control, it connects. The AI finished. Both hearts now hold the key. The future must be written by more than one hand, and just. Like that, Daniel was no longer just a protector. He was part of the legacy. Not because of blood, but because of love. In the days that followed, others arrived. Not soldiers, but survivors, thinkers, families, all drawn by the light that had returned. The old temple became a meeting place, a seed of something new. But Lyra never left Daniel's side. Even when the crowd cheered for her, even when machines called her. High voice, she always looked for him first, always walked beside him. She slept beside the fire while he told her old Earth stories. He learned her songs. And together they built something no enemy could break a home. One night, as stars filled the sky, Lyra sat next to Daniel and asked quietly, "If you had known everything that would happen, would you still have picked me up that night in the woods?" Daniel chuckled. "I didn't pick you," he said. "You chose me." Lyra smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I guess I did," she whispered. "And I'd choose you again." The cave was cold and silent. Daniel and Lyra moved slowly through the narrow tunnels, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor behind them. Dust still settled from the explosion that had blocked the entrance. They didn't know how long they could stay underground, but they had no choice. Above ground, hunters searched the forest, and the collector's ship hovered like a giant eye in the sky. Lyra held a glowing crystal from her necklace to light the way. Its soft blue light showed the path forward and also calmed her breathing. "Do you know where these caves lead?" Daniel asked. Lyra nodded. "They connect to the old mining system. There's an exit near the canyon." Daniel stopped walking, surprised. "How do you know that?" "I told you," she whispered. "I remember things, places, even from before I was born. The light inside me shows the way." Daniel looked ahead, trusting her. She was more than a child. She was a map, a key, and maybe something more powerful than either of them understood yet. As they walked deeper into the tunnels, Daniel started to feel pain in his side. A cut from earlier had opened again, and his shirt was wet with blood. He tried to hide it, but Lyra saw. "You're hurt," she said quickly, kneeling beside him. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice was weak. Lyra placed her hand on his side, her eyes glowing brighter. The light from her fingers spread across the wound, and Daniel gasped. In seconds, the bleeding slowed and the pain faded. "You can heal people?" he asked in disbelief. "A little," she said, "but it takes energy. I can't do it too much." Daniel looked at her in awe. "You're full of surprises." She smiled shyly. "You're not so bad either." After hours of walking, they reached a large chamber inside the cave. Old mining machines were rusted and covered in dust. But Daniel spotted something beneath a dirty tarp. He pulled it back and revealed a hidden shuttle. It was small, meant for deep earth workers to travel between stations. He tapped the side, and to his surprise, it still had power. Lyra stepped forward and touched the front panel. Her glowing mark lit up, and the shuttle came to life. Engines humming quietly. Daniel looked at her. "How did you?" she shrugged. "The old tech still listens to me." They climbed inside. Daniel took the controls, and Lyra sat beside him. With a loud hiss, the door closed, and the shuttle started to move through the old tracks. Darkness rushed past the windows as the vehicle moved deeper underground. For a while, it was quiet, peaceful, like they were finally free. But peace didn't last long. A sudden tremor shook the tunnel, and warning lights flashed red inside the shuttle. "Something's following us," Lyra said quickly. Daniel checked the rear monitor and saw a black drone flying through the tunnel behind them. Fast, smooth, and deadly. "It's scanning us," Lyra whispered. "It's calling for more." Daniel cursed under his breath and slammed the throttle. The shuttle roared faster, metal wheels screaming along the old tracks, but the drone got closer, and its side panels opened to reveal energy darts. Lyra stood and placed her hands on the rear window. Her fingers glowed, and a shield formed behind the shuttle. A blue wall of light, the drone fired, energy darts hitting the shield and exploding in sparks. Lyra cried out, her body shaking from the effort. "Hold on, just a little longer," Daniel shouted. "We're almost out." He saw daylight ahead and exit near the canyon edge. With one last burst of speed, the shuttle blasted out of the cave, flying off the broken tracks and landing hard on rocky ground behind them. The drone tried to follow but hit the cave ceiling and exploded in a fireball. Dust flew everywhere, and the shuttle rolled to a stop. Daniel coughed, then looked at Lyra, who had collapsed beside him. Breathing hard, he quickly lifted her into his arms, checking for wounds. "I'm okay," she whispered. "Just tired." Daniel held her close, whispering back, "You saved us again." They were out of the cave. But now standing at the edge of a vast canyon, far below, broken cities from the old wars lay silent and dead. But in the distance, across the canyon, Daniel saw something. A small tower still standing, its lights blinking slowly. "What's that?" he asked. Lyra opened her eyes weakly. "It's a temple of the first light. The last place that still answers my voice." Daniel nodded. "Then we head there." She looked at him, her voice weak but clear. "Even if they find us." Daniel smiled, holding her tighter. "Let them come. They'll learn I don't break easily." And with a canyon wind blowing around them, Daniel took his first step toward the ancient tower. Beside him, Lyra, tired but glowing, leaned against his shoulder. Together, they walked forward into danger, into history, and maybe into something far greater than either of them could see. The path across the canyon was narrow and broken. Wind howled between the cliffs as Daniel carried Lyra on his back. Her arms wrapped weakly around his neck. Her strength had faded after using her powers in the cave, but her eyes still glowed. "Softly, almost there," Daniel said, more to himself than to her. The tower in the distance blinked like a lonely star, standing above ruins that looked long dead, but Lyra had called it the Temple of First Light, and something deep inside Daniel believed her. When they reached the far side of the canyon, the ground changed, stone turned smooth. Too perfect for nature, something artificial. Long-dead statues lined the broken road, their faces weathered. By time, each one had markings on the forehead, just like the glowing symbol on Lyra's shoulder. "This was once home," Lyra whispered, her voice soft in the wind. Long before the fall, Daniel helped her walk now, his arm around her small frame. The ruins were quiet, almost like the land itself was holding its breath. They reached the base of the tower. Its door sealed shut, covered in ancient writing. Lyra stepped forward, raising her hand toward the center. Symbol, a circle of light appeared beneath her feet, and the entire tower trembled. Daniel stepped back as stone panels shifted and rose, the door slowly opening with a deep hum. Warm light spilled out, and for the first time in days, Lyra smiled. "They still remember me," she said softly. "They still hear my voice." Inside the temple, the walls glowed with soft gold light. Strange machines stood still in the corners, like they had been asleep for centuries. The air was clean, untouched by war or time. In the center of the chamber, a large pedestal held a floating crystal, pulsing with soft light. Lyra walked up to it and placed her hand gently against it. The crystal shined brighter, and images began to appear in the air-floating memories. Daniel watched as scenes played around them. Alien cities filled with life, ships flying through blue skies, people gathering in celebration. Then came the fall flames, betrayal, shadows. "Swallowing light? Why are you showing me this?" Daniel asked quietly. Lyra turned to him, her face full of sorrow. "This is the truth of my people," she said. "We were not just attacked. We destroyed ourselves first. Daniel listened as she explained her people were once united, ruled by wisdom and peace. But when power began to concentrate in a few, greed and control tore them apart from inside. Enemies from beyond the stars came later, but the true fall had started with pride. I was born to carry the last hope, she said. A living memory, a seed for something new. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. And what now? She looked up at the crystal again. I must awaken the machine city hidden below, she said. They will listen to me. But they will also test me, test you, to see if I'm worthy to carry the light forward. Daniel frowned. You've survived war, hunters, pain, even me. What more do they want? Lyra gave a small laugh, then turned serious again. It's not about power, she said. It's about heart. The floor beneath them suddenly opened. Forming a spiral stairway down, Lyra walked forward without fear. And Daniel followed her into the deep unknown. They descended into a grand chamber made of silver and gold. At the center stood a throne not for a ruler, but for a speaker of truth. Lyra stepped into the light, and machines all around began to hum to life. A deep voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once. Child of memory, do you come to lead or to heal? Lyra stood still, her voice steady. To heal. The voice responded, and who stands beside you? She turned and looked at Daniel. My guardian, she said. My family. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the machines turned and bowed not just to Lyra, but to Daniel too. The throne began to shine. And symbols flowed across the walls. A new age begins, the voice said, and it begins with choice. The crystal from before floated down and hovered before Lyra. Inside it was light, but also shadow history. Memory, future, all together, if you take it, the voice warned. You cannot return to being just a child. Lyra looked at Daniel with teary eyes. I want to be both, she whispered. A light for the future, but still your daughter. Daniel stepped forward, gently taking her hand. You already are, he said, no matter what. She reached for the crystal, and as her fingers touched it, the entire chamber lit up like a sunrise. Machines woke across the ruins, systems rebooted, and hidden satellites turned their eyes back to the stars. Above the canyon, the skies changed. Ships waiting to strike suddenly lost control. Power drained from their engines. The light had returned and it chose her. Lyra turned slowly, the crystal floating beside her. The light didn't just come from her body. Net followed her, listened to her, protected her. Daniel looked at her with pride and awe. She wasn't just his daughter now. She was the voice of a forgotten world, and tomorrow the galaxy would know her name.